Stonehenge, September 1901. One stone, hauled upright and set in concrete by a metallurgist named William Gowland. November 1919. A lintel craned back onto the circle under Colonel William Hawley. 5 more stones follow. 1958. The Great Trilithon lifted off the grass by a Royal Air Force aircraft crane. Borrowed from Boscombe Down, rated at 60 tons and almost not enough. 1964. 4 more. None of it is a secret. English Heritage publishes it themselves. So we have one question. Why did it quietly leave the guidebook for 30 years? Here's the photograph. A mobile crane parked on the grass inside the stone circle. Boom up. A sarsen upright hanging off the hook. The man in the cab is David Healy. He drove cranes for the Royal Air Force at Boscombe Down, a few miles down the road, and English Heritage puts his account on its own website. The crane wasn't built for archaeology. It was an aircraft crane, built for the Bristol Brabazon, rated at 60 tons. Healy says that once they'd rigged the lifting frame, the load was right up against the limit. They lifted anyway. 60 tons is an aircraft rating, and by Healy's own account, the margin was closing fast once the frame went on. That's the machine in the picture. An aircraft crane, on loan, working at the edge of what it was built for, inside a 5,000-year-old monument. And it isn't a leaked photograph. English Heritage put it there. There's a version of this going around that says Stonehenge is fake. Built in the 1920s, a Victorian folly on a hill. That's wrong. Full Fact took it apart properly, and we're not pretending otherwise. The stones are real. The Sarsens came here 5,000 years ago, and the dating holds. Nobody manufactured Stonehenge. But that was never the claim on the table. What got rebuilt isn't the stones. It's the arrangement. Which ones stand, which way they lean, where exactly they sit in the chalk, all of it written down by the men doing it, while they did it. Which is why the guidebook is the strange part. December 31st, 1900. A gale comes across Salisbury Plain overnight. When it clears, stone 22 is lying on the ground, and the lintel that sat on top of it has come down with it. The land belongs to Sir Edmund Antrobus. Stonehenge is his private property, a 5,000-year-old stone circle owned by a baronet, and on New Year's morning part of it is in the grass. By March, he has a committee. The Times reports the plan on the 13th of April, 1901. Engineers will straighten stone 56, the tallest one still up, before it goes the same way. Then they'll set it in concrete so it stays. Notice how small that is. Nobody proposed rebuilding Stonehenge. One stone, leaning badly, propped before it went over like the last one did. That's the entire plan on the table in April 1901. That sounds reasonable enough. The country didn't agree. The Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings had been founded by William Morris to stop exactly this. Its secretary, Hugh Thackeray Turner, wrote against any general replacing of stones. What he wanted instead, in his words, was a determination to do as little as possible in order to save the monument for posterity. Flinders Petrie, the Egyptologist at University College London, wrote to the Times that February, and he picked the word terror. "We have rather a terror of restoration," he wrote. Then he made the distinction that actually matters. It is restoration, as well as safekeeping, that some demand for Stonehenge. John Ruskin's line got dragged in too. Restoration is a lie. Ruskin had meant it about cathedrals. In 1901, they meant it about this. The Times letters column filled up. Down the road in Amesbury, the villagers weren't arguing about philosophy. Antrobus had put a barbed wire fence around the stones and started charging admission, and they marched about it. For as long as anyone could remember, you could walk onto that plain, and put a hand on a sarsen. Now there was wire, and a gate, and a man at the gate taking money. The argument in the Times was about authenticity. The argument in Amesbury was about offense. And Canon Hardwicke Rawnsley, who'd co-founded the National Trust 6 years earlier, said of the men signing off on the work that they had left their eyes behind them. That's the co-founder of the body that now protects half the ancient sites in Britain, telling the restorers they couldn't see. They straightened Stone 56 anyway. The man they hired wasn't an archaeologist. Gowland was a metallurgist. He'd spent 16 years in Japan from 1872, running assays at the Osaka Mint, and on his days off he'd been digging into Kofun burial mounds because he found them interesting. That's where the method came from. Sieve the spoil. Record on a grid. Note where every fragment came from, not just what it was. English Heritage's own assessment is that Japanese excavation at the time was distinctly ahead of its time, and Gowland brought it back to Salisbury Plain in his luggage. 6 weeks, August to the 25th of September. He opened a hole about 17 feet by 13 around the base of Stone 56, and that's all he opened. And here is English heritage on a man with no formal archaeological training. He produced some of the finest, most detailed excavation records ever made at the monument. He settled something too. The stone hammers and the antler picks in his spoil proved Stonehenge was built by people who had no metal at all. Then they righted the stone, and in the writing, Stone 56 moved about 18 inches off where it had stood for 4,000 years. 1919, and the war's over. Hawley takes on 6 stones, numbers 1, 2, 6, 7, 29, and 30. On the 27th of November, a crane lifts the lintel back on top of 6 and 7. Now look at the sockets of stones 6 and 7. When Hawley's team got down to them, there was, in English Heritage's own words, no clear indication of where they had originally stood. The chalk didn't say. The records didn't say. So the placement was left, and this is the phrase on their website, to Hawley's expert judgment. One man looked at the ground and made a call. Then they poured concrete. Not a reckless man either. Hawley was out there in the mud for years, and nobody else volunteered. But the chalk had no socket to read. A decision had to be made that week, and the concrete went in behind it. Every survey and every plan of Stonehenge since has been measured from where he decided those 2 stones went. That call is still standing. Every photograph of Stonehenge taken since 1919 has it in the frame. There's a detail here we like more than we should. To cap the tenons, they needed sheet lead, and the lead came off the roof of Hampton Court Palace, stripped during repairs and sent down the road. So there's Tudor Palace roofing inside a Neolithic joint, and it's been sitting there since 1919. Then something happened that nobody planned for. They stood stones 30 and 1 up straight. Properly vertical, the way a stone circle is supposed to look, and the lintels wouldn't go back on. That leaves 2 possibilities. Either somebody recut those lintels at some point in 5,000 years, or the uprights were never vertical to begin with. Nobody recut the lintels, which means the stones were already leaning when the builders dropped the lintels on top, and the assumption everyone had been working from, that Stonehenge started out plumb and drifted, was just wrong. The Office of Works stopped there. Not for money. English Heritage says part of the reason was a worry about accusations of faking the monument. The people holding the tools were the ones who raised it. We made a video about the room behind Tutankhamun's north wall, where the same thing happens in a different country. A scan says one thing, an institution says another, and the wall stays shut. It's on screen now if you want it after this. Right, back to Salisbury Plain, because the stones weren't the worst of it. Hawley kept digging until 1926. 7 seasons, most of them alone, living in 2 wooden huts he'd put up on the site. There's an aerial photograph from the 10th of February, 1922, and there they are. 2 sheds and a stone circle, and nothing else. What he pulled out of the ground was the largest collection of Neolithic cremated remains ever found in Britain. Hundreds of people, burned and buried at Stonehenge. In 1935, they put it all back, unanalyzed, into a single pit, Aubrey Hole 7, everything mixed together. It sat there for 73 years. In 2008, the Stonehenge Riverside Project dug it up again, and Mike Parker Pearson of University College London and his team went through more than 50,000 bone fragments and found at least 63 individuals in the mixture. At least. Once burnt bone from hundreds of burials goes into one hole and gets stirred, the number you can prove is a floor, not a count. Who they were. Where in the monument each was laid. Who was buried beside whom. All of it went into Aubrey Hole 7 in 1935, and none of it came back out. And at the edge of the hole was a woman's grave, untouched. Hawley had dug past it in 1920. Another team dug past it in 1935. Neither of them saw it. The archaeologist Mike Pitts asked the only question that follows. How many more had they dug over and not seen? Hawley was stopped in 1926 because the work was thought to be unproductive. English Heritage's own page calls that judgment unfair. He died in 1941. The finds are in Salisbury Museum. 1958. The great trilithon, uprights 57 and 58, and the lintel that sat across them, was flat on the grass. The Royal Air Force crane came up from Boscombe Down and put it back. Stone 58 had a crack running through it. On the 20th of August, they drilled 3 holes straight through the stone, using a diamond drilling firm called Van Maupus. On the 30th of September, they pinned it. There's metal inside that sarsen right now, and there has been since 1958. The archaeologists on site were Richard Atkinson, then a lecturer at the University of Edinburgh, and Stuart Piggott, the Abercrombie Professor of Archaeology in the same department. And one more name sits on English Heritage's list of who was involved. J.F.S. Stone. Stone died on the 12th of May, 1957. We're not going to make that mean anything. It's a page on a website and pages carry errors, but it's on the record, next to work he didn't live to see, and nobody has taken it down. Atkinson ran the excavations from 1950 to 1964. 14 years. He published the 1950 season. That's it. 14 years of digging at the most studied prehistoric monument in Europe, and 1 season's report. He died in 1994, with the rest unwritten. In 1995, English Heritage finally put the material out as Stonehenge in its landscape, compiled by the archaeologists Keiller, Walker, and Montague. There's a line in it about what they had to work with. By this time, many site plans and drawings had been lost. The primary records of the biggest excavation ever carried out at Stonehenge. After Atkinson died, more than 2,000 photographs of his digs turned up. He'd written a book in 1956 with a sentence in it that people still quote as humility. To all those questions beginning why, there is but one short, simple, and perfectly correct answer. We do not know, and shall probably never know. He was right about the why. He also had the answers to a lot of the how, and he never wrote them down. And somewhere in those same years, the guidebook stopped mentioning any of it. 20-odd miles north of Stonehenge is Avebury. Bigger circle, less famous, and it's where this stops being about one monument. Avebury was bought by a man named Alexander Keiller. Keiller's money came from marmalade. The family firm in Dundee made the orange stuff, and between 1924 and 1939, he spent it buying Avebury, about 950 acres of Wiltshire, in pieces, until he owned the stone circle and the village standing inside it. Then he went to work. West Kennet Avenue in 1934 and 35, the northwest sector in 37, southwest in 38, southeast in 39. He pulled down cottages that were in the way. He found buried stones and stood them back up. He set them in concrete, and where a stone was missing entirely, he put in a concrete pillar to mark the spot. In 1943, he sold the lot to the National Trust for £12,000. That's the farmland price for 950 acres. The stone circle came free. Go and read the National Trust's own page on Avebury. How Avebury looks now is in part due to his work. The historian Brian Edwards at the University of the West of England puts it harder. A total 20s and 30s rebuild by a marmalade millionaire. And the flat version, the one that turns up in the archaeological literature rather than in a press quote, is that Avebury today is largely Keiller's creation. The circle people photograph every summer is a 1930s reconstruction with a Neolithic parts list, and the National Trust says so itself. Keiller died with his excavations unpublished too. Isabel Smith wrote them up in 1965, years after he was gone. Which brings us back to the guidebook. In 2001, Edwards was working through an archive and he found them. The cranes, the scaffolding, the concrete going in. Photographs that had been sitting in the files the whole time. The reporting from that year quotes Dave Batchelor, then a senior archaeologist at English Heritage, and this is a press quote from 2001 rather than anything on their site today, so take it as what it is. The detail was dropped in the 1960s, he said. But times have changed, and we now believe this is an important piece of the Stonehenge story and must be told. The detail was dropped in the 1960s. Dropped. Not hidden, not destroyed, just dropped out of the guidebook, and 30 years of visitors walked around that circle without it. Edwards said it had been as if Stonehenge had been historically cleansed, and that he was astonished by how few people knew. And then, there's the number. Christopher Chippindale of Cambridge wrote Stonehenge Complete, the standard history of the monument. He put it plainly. Nearly all the stones have been moved in some way and are standing in 50-year-old concrete. So count the sarsen uprights at Stonehenge that are still sitting in the sockets the builders cut for them. Never lifted off the ground by a crane, never reset, never straightened by anybody with a theodolite and a committee behind him. Still where they were put. 7. Historic England published a survey of the whole landscape in 2015, written by Mark Bowden, Sharon Sutar, and Martin Barber. There's one sentence in it we keep coming back to. Stonehenge was subjected to more alterations during the 20th century than at any point since the Bronze Age. More than at any point since the Bronze Age. And that's what keeps this from being a scandal, because the people who built it did the same. They moved the bluestones. They took parts of the circle down and set them up again, more than once, across centuries. Stonehenge was never finished. It was a building site for something like 1,500 years. So when we ask what the original Stonehenge looked like, we're asking a question the monument was never going to answer. Gowland moved one stone 18 inches. The builders moved theirs, and moved them again, and left no note about why. 7 uprights stand where the first builders put them. Everything else stands where somebody in the last 120 years decided it should go. And we don't know which of those calls were right.